Oh, snap. We are live for another episode of the Cole Memo. Folks, we just wrapped up a live stream featuring somebody from the hemp cannabis space. And today we're going to be talking about the latest news in the latest Illinois cannabis news, that is. And folks, I hope you are doing well. I hope that you are off to a good start this week. And if you missed it, I was on High at 9 News today. Definitely check that out. If you did miss that, no sweat. Some of what I'll be covering in today's news broadcast will fill you in on what you missed. We've got some interesting stories today, some about police running dispensaries. Oh, gosh, gotta love that. We've also got a story that I wrote that's a follow up on the outdoor cultivation of cannabis in the state of Illinois. Definitely some interesting stuff there. So if you're tuning in right now, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel so that you can get more, well, so that you never miss a live stream. And we got our first comment in, and actually, this question from a commenter says, "Did you see that NIST can measure THC in breath after consumption?" Yeah, I think we discussed that today on High at 9 News. Definitely an interesting development, and I'll be curious to see how that continues to develop. So, folks, it looks like we've got people on YouTube, some people on Twitter tuning in. I hope you're strapped in for another episode of
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo is what allows this whole thing to go on.
I mean, you have to respect the memo.
Hey, this is Tommy Chong, and you're listening and watching the Cole Memo.
All right. And the first story I'm going to be discussing today is from Block Club Chicago, which, as you may have guessed, is an outlet out of Chicago. And the headline is "Dispensary Planned for West Ridge, Partially Owned by 10 Former Cops," officials say. Relief would be the first dispensary for the Canna Group, I think that's how you pronounce that, which received a social equity cannabis license. Some neighbors questioned if police, who once enforced marijuana criminal penalties, should now be profiting from the drug. What do you guys think about that idea? So the article again covers a dispensary to be called Relief. It would take over an empty storefront at 2415 West Peterson Avenue, which apparently previously held an Asian buffet style restaurant. The new store would use existing off-street parking lot adjacent to the building and feature minimal signs on the exterior, project officials said during a virtual community meeting held Tuesday by Alderman Andre Vasquez, 40th Ward office. So definitely interesting. Miggy comments and says, "This shows you how many investors are needed in this." Yeah, definitely capital heavy industry, the cannabis industry in Illinois. So the Canna Group received Canna. I don't know how they, what do you guys think? How do you pronounce that? Canna? I'm going to say Canna Group received a dispensary license as part of the state's social equity cannabis program, which seeks to boost minority participation in the legal cannabis industry after years of the war on drugs adversely impacted minority communities, records show. As former officers, Canna Group principals are aware of drug enforcement's impact on such communities and their role in that system, a representative said. Prioritizing social equity is at the center of Canna's business model, and team members have, quote, "a lot of empathy," end quote, for people who have been adversely affected by the criminalization of cannabis. Michael Collins, a real estate agent working with the Canna Group, said at the meeting. So, according to this article, 85% of company staff is Black, and one Canna Group member has a child who is currently imprisoned over a marijuana possession charge. there's a quote that says, "We want to be cognizant of the history as we're going into this. The laws were different back then, and many people were just doing their job." And Joseph Ferguson just dropped a comment. Thank you so much. They say drug enforcement is still a reality. Absolutely, especially in the state of Illinois, where apparently we legalized cannabis, but we still have, as Joseph Ferguson said, drug enforcement as the primary enforcement mechanism for the cannabis industry. So, a list of the former officers involved in the Canna Group were not released at the meeting, but that information would be shared with neighbors at a later date, company representatives said. Canna Group appears to have been founded by someone who hasn't worked as a police officer, according to state business records. The officers involved in the company met through St. Sabina Church in 2019, according to Damon Richardson, I guess. It's hard for me to tell based on how this article is written. Damon Richardson said the dispensary would have a focus on community engagement. So again, I'm just curious, what do you all think about a dispensary that's being opened up by 10? Did they say? Yeah, 10 former cops. Super, super interesting, to say the least, from my perspective. And in fact, it sort of reminds me of this story that I'm about to display on screen, which was from the Chicago Sun-Times. This came out in 2020, and the article starts by saying, a famed restaurateur, an ex-Chicago police commander, a longtime Republican Party operative, a former Chicago Transit Authority official, a cannabis industry insider related to a former state lawmaker, and a former director of the state agency that oversees weed dispensaries. What do they all have in common? They're working together for Green Renaissance, Illinois, a budding firm that was recently named as a finalist in the state lottery for the next round of pot shop licenses. And of course, you might be wondering, Cole, what made you think of this? It was this part, the part that says an ex-Chicago police commander. Joseph Ferguson says St. Sabina's is a South Side Catholic church and school. Good to know. Good to know. I honestly did not know that. So, yeah, interesting stuff there. Again, just curious what you all think. I'll have this article linked in the show notes. We'll move on to our next story, which, like I said, I covered on High at 9 News today. Super fun, super fun. Always fun to make an appearance on any show. The article, which is titled Another Outdoor Cannabis Lawsuit Hits Illinois. And this article is available at colememo.com. I published it on July 25th. And just before we get into that, I want to give a little bit of background. So in case you didn't know, in Illinois, the law requires that all cannabis cultivation take place in what's called an enclosed, locked facility, which in practice has generally meant indoor grows. That's been the standard that you see across the industry. But a few years ago, I started hearing rumors that some licensed cultivators were growing outdoors. And at first, I wasn't able to find much confirmation of this. I mean, just with that last story, as I've covered many times in the past, like cannabis companies can divulge information to the public if they so choose. But a lot of this information about the facility, the owners in general, behind the license, is all protected by state law, which is, according to reporting from the Chicago Tribune, has proven problematic in other lucrative industries like gambling, where reputed mob ties sent officials in Illinois scrambling. So, the long story short, and the reason I brought it back to those first two articles that I reported, is that there's a lot of information in Illinois about licensees that is kept under lock and key. And as a result, it's hard to get much of anything about the industry and who's behind it and what they're actually doing. So I started researching and having conversations with folks within the cannabis industry in Illinois, and I narrowed it all down to two facilities that appeared to be using outdoor greenhouses, or screen houses as they call them. And both were several hours from me, so I did not plan on visiting them until I made an acquaintance who worked at one of the sites. I asked if they had an outdoor grow space. They said yes. They were actively prepping it for the season. A few weeks later, they let me know the plants were officially in the ground. And that's when I decided to go and see all of this for myself. So when I arrived, what struck me was how accessible the structure was. There were no gates. I didn't see any trespassing signs, just cameras and some fencing around the site. And I saw firsthand cannabis plants growing out in the open Illinois air, which seemed clearly part of a licensed cultivation center, which was overseen by the Illinois Department of Agriculture. And that was my confirmation that this can't be a secret grow. This has to be sanctioned, at least in some capacity. And again, if folks are wondering, like, this isn't that groundbreaking, Cole. Haven't you seen weed growing outdoors before? Yes, I have seen it growing outdoors in the past. I've been to the fields at the University of Illinois where you've got literally fields of cannabis growing. So it's not that it's mind blowing to see it being grown outside. It's mind blowing to see it being grown outside when technically it's under the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. And Miggy, I'm so glad you just said this comment. Hemp farms aren't under this type of scrutiny. So what's interesting is that hemp actually ends up coming up in this story, but I'll just continue here. So um, from there, I kept digging. I pulled some satellite images of both of the properties. I found publicly available photos. I want to back up just in a moment. Hemp farms, if you're licensed under hemp, all of that information is publicly available, unlike cannabis companies. And so you could say that they are more open to scrutiny. Now, whether or not anybody does that, I think is your point. So I pulled satellite imagery of the sites. I found publicly available photos that were actually in an article. And I even took my own photos and videos with cannabis plants clearly in view. And I started pressing the state for answers. I asked, how is this allowed? Each time, my questions were politely but firmly denied on the record. It wasn't until I started combing through court records that things became more clear. In at least two separate legal filings, cultivators argued that they had been granted permission to grow outdoors using so-called screen rooms. In one case, the grow was limited to, quote, low THC strains, end quote. In another, the cultivator was explicitly allowed to grow what was referred to as CBD cannabis. In both cases, the state's approval was tied to the condition that the plants would be used for extraction only. In one case, they claimed that this outdoor greenhouse space made up roughly 40% of their annual cannabis yield. And here's where it gets especially interesting. I've seen documentation showing that these growers were required to register as hemp processors, or rather get hemp licenses um, to do this outdoor grow. This paperwork, as far as I can tell, was used to authorize what would otherwise be unallowable outdoor cultivation of cannabis plants under the CRTA. It seems like it was like, all right, you can do this, but it's got to be hemp and it can only be used for extraction purposes. In other words, like vapes and edibles. So, from what I've been able to gather, it appears that this was something that was quietly permitted under previous leadership at the Department of Agriculture, but new leadership at the Department of Agriculture appears to have taken a different view. They've attempted to rescind permission for these outdoor grows, a shift that has already triggered at least two legal challenges. And in my article that I'll be sharing today, I'll be sharing what appears to be a third case that has now been filed against the state of Illinois. And so I'm displaying it on screen right now. As I've discussed, for nearly 2 years, I've been sharing details about what I feel is a little discussed aspect of Illinois cannabis policy. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard, well, I'll take it back a little bit. I think I've heard the two dope dudes on the Elevated News podcast. I think I've heard them talk about outdoor grow a little bit. Aside from that, I'm not aware of, it doesn't mean there doesn't exist, but I'm not aware of any other coverage of this topic. On screen right now, you can see one of the pictures that I found at marijuanaventure.com, and this is the structure that I'm referring to. So all of this indoor grow, this is like pretty well on par with If you can see my mouse, there's two red structures at closest to the camera in this picture. And those are pretty well in line with what you see for cannabis cultivation facilities in Illinois. This structure to the back and left, it's like a black screen. I'll try to zoom in a little bit here. And I don't know if you can see my mouse. Somebody who's watching, if you can comment and let me know, can you see my mouse? Oh, you can see my mouse now. My mouse is hovering around the outdoor section. I get the impression that this is also part of what's considered to be the outdoor section, but I could be wrong on that. I'm reading court documents and it's sort of hard to tell. But these facilities up front are more or less in line with what most cultivation facilities are. So they are enclosed, locked, totally indoor. And so the reason I'll just take a brief tangent that I've been so interested in this is because I've followed this issue close. Well, okay, so let me restart that thought there. I find this to be so fascinating because many craft cultivators in Illinois, as has been reported for years, and most recently by Crane's Chicago Business, which we covered on the show in the past, have struggled. These craft cultivators and other growers have struggled to open their doors and get product to market. Many see outdoor cultivation as a way for the state to offer flexibility, not only for licensed operators, but also for those legally allowed to cultivate at home, such as medical cannabis patients. Hey, thank you for tuning in, Miggy. Definitely hit me up when you're here in October. I would love to smoke with you. And Joseph Friedman says, indoor cannabis requires massive amounts of energy to cultivate. Yeah, I agree. And so those are two reasons. The reason that Joseph just brought up, and the other reason that I just brought up, which is you look at those facilities. I'll put them back on screen really quick. These facilities, they cost a lot of money. I don't know about you, but I can't just build something like this. I don't have the capital. I don't have the money. I don't have anything. I can't build something like this. But something like this, I probably still couldn't build something like this because this requires a lot of space. But when you really look at these structures, when you get real close to them, like I have, they're just I describe them as a trip to a Home Depot. In other words, you get some like tent poles, you get some screens, you get some cameras from Best Buy, I guess, because they've got cameras up too, and you got a grow structure up in a day. And that's why I think that, the state should like throw these people a freaking bone, throw everybody a bone and allow them to grow cannabis outdoors, just like we do with these other plants that are seen in the background. See, these are fields that are surrounding this agricultural facility because this is on the family farm for this company. And so I think we should just, allow cannabis to be grown outdoors by people that can. And that includes, and this is kind of why I wrote the article, medical cannabis patients who are allowed to grow. If, Illinois is, first of all, an agricultural state where cannabis is grown naturally for years. And I'll show you a picture to prove that in just a moment. The state has some of the most stringent testing requirements in the country. So honestly, it remains unclear to me what the concern is with allowing this activity to take place. If our testing requirements are so stringent, I think we should be able to consume this outdoor grown cannabis. And as I show this picture, Joseph is saying outdoor cannabis is widespread in Hawaii and Kentucky. And I'm actually displaying a picture of some cannabis that's growing outdoors on the county farm of John Block. And fun fact, the building for the Illinois Department of Agriculture that houses the division of cannabis, at least the last time I was there, was in the John Block building. Funny how that comes full circle. This is cannabis growing on John Block's farm, I guess, in the 1980s. It's from a newspaper. So wild cannabis growing in the state of Illinois. So this was brought to my attention. These new details that I've got today were brought to my attention from a report from Law 360, which confirms some of the details that I shared very early on and brings to light new information regarding the ongoing legal disputes over outdoor cultivation in Illinois. According to the reporter, Jonathan Capriel, I hope I'm saying that right, Compass Ventures Incorporated, a subsidiary of Curaleaf, has filed a lawsuit against the Illinois Department of Agriculture over the agency's refusal to approve a proposed 42,000 square foot hoop house at its Montgomery cultivation site. According to the law, according to the Law 360 report, Compass alleges that its structure, which includes 24-hour surveillance, fencing, and other security measurements, meets all legal requirements. The lawsuit claims that IDOA rejected the permit on the grounds that the hoop house does not qualify as an enclosed, locked facility, citing a requirement for solid walls and a solid ceiling. Compass disputes this interpretation and, according to the complaint, argues that the agency has approved similar structures referred to as screen houses for at least 2 other cultivators in the past. The Law 360 report notes that the complaint cites 2 prior circuit court rulings, one in Rock Island County and another in Fulton County, that reportedly struck down this exact interpretation. According to the article, both courts found the department's position invalid under the Illinois Administrative Procedure Act because it had not gone through the proper notice, comment, or publication process. So, just getting a quick drink of water here. Some inside baseball that I didn't include in my article. Basically, the way that at least I understand this to have gone down is that, again, under prior leadership, somebody said, yeah, you can grow low THC cannabis or CBD cannabis, but you have to get a hemp license, and here is your permit modification. Then new leadership took over, and basically, we not only had a new governor, but we had like a new house within the Illinois Department of Agriculture, and they basically tried to rescind that temporary permission via email. And so I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. Had to take a quick break. My cat wanted in the room, and it gave me a chance to grab a bowl, which is something I haven't done in a while on this show, but here we go. Cheers, folks. Okay, so back to it. So the Illinois Department of Agriculture, from what I've been able to gather, reached out to these people via email and said, hey, you're like, this isn't going to be allowed to happen anymore, which is not the proper way of doing things, I've come to understand. What they should have done, I guess, is submit a new rule and allowed people to comment on said rule. And then that would have been the proper way of dealing with this, and maybe it wouldn't have become the issue that it is today. But the flip side of that, again, just like from my perspective, is that if you put something out like that, then you let everybody know, hey, we only gave 2 people the ability to grow outdoors. Hey, what the fuck? Hey, actually, no, let's not do that. And then all the growers can like band together to make sure that doesn't become a thing. I think that I'm speculating right now. I think the Illinois Department of Agriculture thought that this was just going to be an easy thing. Like, hey, we're going to ask you to not do that anymore. And that these people would be like, all right, we won't do that anymore. But it did not go that way. And they seemed to have some pretty crafty lawyers that were able to look into how the Illinois Administrative Procedure Act, or whatever the hell it's called, actually works, and found that basically these actions were not, the court found, I should say, that that the department's position was invalid under the Illinois APA, Administrative Procedure Act, because it hadn't gone through the proper procedures. So that all follows my coverage of Green Thumb Industries and Nature's Grace and Wellness's. Basically, they had received variances allowing outdoor cultivation under a prior administration. And in 2024, I obtained and published the recession letters issued to both companies, which confirmed that the department had attempted to revoke those permissions. I was not able to get confirmation from any state official at the time, and I was not aware of anybody else sharing any details related to this. So I did try to obtain information from the department through multiple avenues, including a formal FOIA request and direct questions to public officials. So far, all of my requests for comment or clarification were denied. Now, I was told by high ranking officials within the Illinois Department of Agriculture that the department's reluctance to speak publicly stemmed from the fact that outdoor cultivation was no longer permitted. I was basically told that the department was already facing legal action as a result of the attempted recession, which is why they were not going to be commenting on the issue for me at all. So that's, it is what it is. That's what people do, or organizations do when they're going to court. They don't talk about it, especially if they're the defendant. That's what I've come to learn. So according to the Law 360 report, Compass is asking the Montgomery Circuit Court to impose an injunction that would require the department to process its permit request. The case, Compass Ventures v. Illinois Department of Agriculture, which you can find by going to the Montgomery County Circuit Court and looking up case number 2025 MR28, could become a legal flashpoint in the broader conversation about the stringent requirements of cannabis cultivation in Illinois. I did reach out to the attorney representing Compass / Curaleaf for comment, and I actually didn't hear back from them, but I did get a statement from Curaleaf chairman and CEO Boris Jordan. So the following statement was provided to the Cole Memo by a representative from Mateo Communications, who communicated on behalf of Curaleaf chairman and CEO Boris Jordan with this statement. Curaleaf has filed a lawsuit with the Illinois Department of Agriculture to affirm our position that operating cultivation facilities within enclosed hoop houses complies with the state's definition of an enclosed locked facility. Despite receiving no formal response or even a courtesy rejection from the department, we continue to advocate for the right to cultivate cannabis in secure hoop houses equipped with 24/7 surveillance, as outlined within state regulations. This roadblock represents yet another unfortunate example of state regulators obstructing the growth of the regulated cannabis industry. We believe that when regulators prevent licensed operators from expanding access to legal cannabis for patients and consumers, they are effectively pushing demand toward the illicit and unregulated market. So, folks, that is that's the latest on outdoor cultivation in Illinois. It's been interesting. I've definitely been seeing more people cover it this go round. I will say like the coverage that I've seen, and I'll try to pull it up right now. I think I saw it on Illinois Trees earlier today, which I am trying to pull up right now. If you're tuned in live, drop your comments below. I could try to answer any questions before I go. Let me know if you've got any questions. So yeah, I saw an article from chicagobusiness.com shared on Illinois Trees about this lawsuit, which was interesting. Again, I've not seen people cover any of this information in the past, except for, again, I should give credit, I believe. Maybe I saw the Two Dope Dudes on the Elevated News podcast cover this subject in the past. So I just think it's interesting, and I want to hear people's takes on this. So I wish more people would cover it and that more information would come out. I did want to show, I did get a response when I dropped this article on outdoor cultivation, and I got some comments. Since we're not getting any comments in the live stream, I see 19 of you are tuned in. Drop your comments if you've got any, or questions if you have any. So I posted this on Instagram, and maybe I can share my screen. Yeah, there we go. And a few different people commented. The Wiz says, "Let it grow." Cannabis says, "Careful what you wish for." Made content says, "Out dough is how God intended," and I completely agree. Um, I got the Munchies official, which is actually a cannabis brand here in the state of Illinois, says Illinois growing outside would. Oh, I guess I'm not showing my screen right now. Sorry, folks, just reading things. Illinois growing outside would collapse the entire Illinois cannabis market, leaving only a few to benefit. Look at the Oklahoma, Michigan, California, and look at Oklahoma, Michigan, California, and Oregon. They all collapsed because they had unaccounted for canopy space, allowing for all types of activity to occur. Dot, 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 dot. Mr. Friday says Illinois outdoor is trash, anyways. And I'll concede all of these points that Michigan had issues, that Oklahoma, Oregon, and California had issues. I'll also concede that Illinois is not always the ideal climate to cultivate cannabis in. However, if you can do it and if you can make it happen, then I think you should be able to do it and make it happen. And that's sort of why I said in the article that if Illinois has the most stringent testing requirements in the nation, then if that cannabis can't pass the testing requirements, then it shouldn't be on the shelf. And personally, like I say, when I've grown cannabis outdoors and it's not come out good because of humidity or whatever, like if you're a home grower, you learn those things and you just throw the batch out. Um, you know, I don't know. I just think that, like, again, what inspired this whole article was that these cultivation facilities are so hard to build out that I just felt like this was an option that the state could extend to um, that the state could extend to operators so that it's like instead of being a trip that involves like architects and fucking a bunch of building equipment and shit like that, that it could be a trip to Home Depot, like I said earlier. And that's really why I have written this article. And then just to further extend that point, this article recently came out and I covered it on the show, I think. But this article talks about this is from Crane Chicago Business. And this guy who's been on the show in the past, Reese Xavier, says he's not made a dollar in the last 5 years. So, he's got this hard hat on and everything, but he's not selling anything, which fucking sucks. Like, I feel for them. They should be selling cannabis right now, and they're not. And so that's why I bring up proposals like these, because I just thought it would it's like throw me a freaking bone here, right? And so I feel like this is a bone that Illinois could throw people. Not that you would be producing the best cannabis in the world, although if you could, props to you. The idea would be that, again, there are people that are not even putting products out of the door. So maybe you aren't putting the best products out of the door, but at least you're getting products out of the door. That's the idea. That's why I bring this up. That's the hope. And again, I also think that medical patients are. I think everybody should be able to grow cannabis, but currently only medical patients can grow cannabis, and I think they should be able to do that outdoors. And I think it's silly that technically speaking they can't, although I know a lot of people that do. Well, folks, I hope you found value in this newscast. I'll try to keep it short and to that. Um, Definitely drop some comments below and let me know if what you think about all these things, about these stories that I covered. Um, don't don't forget to smash that like button if you like it. I know it's something that all YouTubers say, but if you liked the show, hit that like button. It truly does help the show. It makes it so that the show gets presented to new viewers potentially. They could say, "Hey, you might like this show because a lot of people like this show. So if you can hit that like button, if you do enjoy the show, I would appreciate it. And if you don't enjoy the show, comment below and let me know some things that you think would make it better. And please do it in good faith. Don't hurt my feelings. Folks, I hope you found this episode of the Cole Memo entertaining, valuable, informative, all those things. Thank you to everybody that tuned in. I see we have about 17 listeners, which is super cool for a live stream that I totally did not even announce. So I appreciate y'all tuning in and hanging in for this live episode of the Cole Memo. We'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody. Have a great week. It's only Monday. We'll get there. It'll be Friday before you know it.